Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it.
So, do you think Naples is a misunderstood city?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people have the perception that it's dirty, that it's dangerous, that it's really not much to see here. I think that's changed over the years, especially since the time you and I came here the first time. But I was in Greece last year and I met this guy who was like, oh, where do you live in Italy? So I said, well, the biggest city's Naples. And he said, well, it's kind of dirty. And he was just sort of like, eh. And I couldn't believe that because, as far as big cities goes, I don't think Naples is dirty. There's dirty places everywhere. Like there are some sketch dirty areas in Toronto that I've seen, and I'm sure that that's the same for other big cities. But overall, I don't think Naples is a dirty or a dangerous city. And I think because of that perception, maybe it has been overlooked by many, but I think that's changing, don't you?
Yeah, I think it's been blown up quite a bit out of proportion. I think they've cleaned it up a lot since we first visited it. So, it's no longer as dirty as it once was. I think it's a lot cleaner. They cleaned a lot of the areas up. And the crime's gone down quite a bit. So, granted, I don't think the crime was very high anyway, but, there's a lot of petty theft and that type of sort of thing. So I think it's improved quite a bit. And I really think it's an underrated city.
Yeah, I think it's one of those places that a lot of people are either like really love it and are very passionate about it, or they're just sort of like, no, I don't want to go. Or maybe when they came, they didn't have a great experience. But, if you come to Naples and you only see, let's say, around the airport or around the train station, and that's your whole impression of the city, then it's probably not going to be a positive one. I'm not to say that it's a bad area, but it's just like in any big city, right? Like the train station, any kind of large transportation hub, you have a lot more, homeless people, you have a lot more people trying to like do business, go. So it's not necessarily like a touristy area to hang out in, but I still think it's fine. I just think that if you only see this, you might not have the best impression of Naples, which is, I think it's a huge miss because Naples has so much to offer.
Yeah, there's, for such a large city, and it's the third largest city in Italy. And, I don't think it's, any different than any other place when it comes to, crime. So, we've been there several times, and we enjoy it every time we go. Plenty of places, great places to eat. Lots of, it's just, the city's really walkable. So, there's lots of things to see. So, I highly recommend going.
Yeah, and I think we go there so much that a lot of people think we live in Naples. I get a lot of comments, people saying, oh, I don't know, something like the comments they make, and they actually think we live in Naples. And I have to tell people that, no, unfortunately, we don't. We are about an hour away. So, maybe for here, that's going for an hour away is a big thing. But for us in Canada, like an hour is not a big deal. So, yeah, we go to Naples quite often. And then as I can say easily that the more we go, the more I like it. And the more things I find to like about it. But did you know that in 2022, CNN named Naples as one of the best tourist attractions for that year? And it was the only Italian city in the ranking.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. And, Naples, I think, is so interesting because, you see the pictures of the iconic skyline of, the Vesuvius in the background and like overlooking the Bay of Naples. And that is such a I love that view. Like we've gone to so many places and like the sunsets in Naples are just unreal.
Yeah, there's so many great sights, and yeah, the views are great. Like there's some areas that you can just overlook the water, and it's such a close vicinity to the Amalfi Coast that you got the same coast basically that you can see the wonderful skyline and waterfront.
Yeah, so Naples, I mean, for a city that's like, what, 2000 years old, over 2000 years old, there's a lot of history here. So again, like if you like me and you love history and you love architecture, you love a lot of that old ancient stuff, Naples is like the city to see it. I think it is the largest historic center in Europe, actually. And it was declared a UNESCO site, I think it was 1995. And it's also one of the most unchanged because I guess so much, like it's so concentrated that they haven't really changed in like centuries, right? So Naples is quite interesting. And for me, one of the most interesting parts about it is that it actually has Greek origins. So again, it's laid out sort of like a Greek city. And like when you go to Spanish Quarter, that's still like one of the most impressive examples of like that Greco-Roman architecture.
Yeah, and I think the Spanish Quarter is a pretty interesting area to visit. Outside of the great restaurants in that vicinity, there's a lot of old architecture to view.
And did you know that there are 500 churches in Naples?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, apparently it has a name of 500 domes. You never heard that, but you know how we see all these little shrines all over the place? Like when you walk down the streets, there's like a little, like a niche with like some kind of religious icon and a light. Apparently, there are like 2,000 of them all over the city. And yes, they served as, religious things, but they were also part of a lighting network for the alleys. Because I guess back in the days, those alleys were pretty dark, so they used those little shrines as to light the way.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, let's not forget all the famous people that came out of Naples.
Yeah, and I think one of the most famous people, I guess, it's Sophia Loren, even though she was born in Rome. Sophia grew up in Naples. So whenever you go around Naples, you do see some pictures of her. But we must say the most famous person in Naples is not really from Naples, and that's Diego Maradona.
Yeah, Diego Maradona, the really back in the day, he was probably the most hated outside of Italy, obviously, because no one really liked him. But here in Naples, it's they he was treated like a god. He put them back on the map. Since he arrived to the city, playing for the Naples soccer team, Maradona's been, the person that everyone looks up to when they, begin their soccer career. Not to mention those famous 5 days in April 1990, a string of five consecutive victories for the team. They overtook Milan and in the standings, and Maradona, raised the Italian Champions Cup.
Yeah, and I think you can see his lasting legacy because you can see pretty much as many as those like religious icons you see. I would say there's probably just as many, if not more, images of Maradona everywhere. You have like little flags, you have like street art. Like it's pretty much everywhere. There's some sort of like some sort of picture of his face or something to do with it, which to me, it's like, show me when you're in Naples without showing me you're in Naples. If you see a picture of Maradona, I think that would clearly be one of those people.
Yeah, there's murals of him everywhere in Naples, and posters, paintings, murals. Yeah, it's crazy. I'd never thought of him as being such a popular figure here, but after visiting so many times, you see him in every corner basically, and every time they celebrate a victory, somehow there's that statue or a poster of Maradona that shows up. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about the murals because remember we're meeting friends of ours and we were meeting them in some area and we said, oh, we're gonna be by the big Diego Maradona like mural, and they're like, well, that doesn't really narrow it down because there's so many of them, which just kind of points to how revered this guy is in Naples. But again, there's so many things in Naples that are sort of like a contradiction. Like Diego Maradona being one of them. The guy is an outsider, but he made an effect on the city, and like everybody just still loves him. But again, when you go back to Naples and you think of Naples as a city, like it's got such a huge, long history. And, not to be like totally like going into like professor of history mode, but, it's over 2000 years. And like I mentioned earlier, it was settled by the Greeks. So you do have a lot of Greek influences. And, it was actually a Roman ally against Carthage. And eventually, I guess it became part of the Roman Empire. So the Romans, of course, came and took over, as they did with a lot of different things. And the city flourished under them. So you see a lot of, and I guess we'll get more into it later on, but you'll see a lot of still integrated, like ancient elements, which I love. So sometimes you'll see like columns that are like from the Roman temples, or you can check out some Greek cisterns, and they're really fascinating. So again, like you had that whole ancient component to it, which I find fascinating. And then you get into like, the later years. So it was ruled by a lot of like European houses of like royal houses, right? So it was ruled by the Normans. Then it became part of the Spanish Empire. So you have a lot of Spanish influences, which maybe most people might not think about. Then I think at some point, I think during the 17th century, it was the second largest city in Europe, just behind Paris. So you can just imagine like how much influence it had. And we've gone to so many like museums and palaces that, there's so many beautiful Baroque places and other architecture, which I find just amazing. So, I think that goes back to that time. So, you do have a lot of Baroque. You had these famous artists like Caravaggio, Bernini. They were all coming here and creating things, which again is fascinating. And then you have that whole component of Naples becoming ruled by the Spanish Bourbon kings. So again, you have that Spanish influence continuing. Then you have, Napoleon after he came around. And I think there was a series of like Bonaparte kings. And I think I think Napoleon's sister was she was a queen at some point. I remember seeing it in a museum. So yeah, it's like a rich tapestry of different things until Naples became part of the Kingdom of Italy, which again just shows you how just diverse the history and how rich in like culture and like architecture tradition the city is. So if you love history, you love culture, like really Naples is the place to be.
Yeah, Naples surprisingly had such a prolific role throughout the Italian history. So it's pretty impressive, its connections to throughout the centuries and various kingdomhoods, right?
Well, another thing that Naples has going for it and is known for is its dialect. So we've traveled a lot, and people can tell when you're from the Neapolitan area. So I guess I've asked you before if you can speak with the Neapolitan dialect, because it's kind of gangster.
Yeah, it's a very distinct dialect, and it's often used in a lot of the movies, Italian movies, and even foreign movies, right? Whenever there's a movie that's based in Italy, many of the times the Neapolitan dialect shows up somehow in some form. So it's actually pretty cool. I grew up on on those Italian movies, so I kind of learned how to speak it. And there was the Avellinese dialect is similar to the one in Naples, so it's not that difficult for me kind of to switch over to that. I try to speak the proper Italian, but certain words do slip through. But it's I think it's a very cool dialect. It's kind of a gangster dialect. A lot of mobsters came from the area, so they have that dialect in a lot of the movies out there. So yeah, and the other interesting thing about it is it's actually a UNESCO intangible heritage asset. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I actually didn't know that. And yeah, like as somebody, like for me, somebody who's trying to learn Italian, it's like when they speak in dialect, and I mean, not to say that everybody in Naples, like you won't like, if you go around, people are just talking in dialect. But when you do come across people who are speaking like the Neapolitan dialect, it honestly doesn't even sound Italian sometimes. Like, again, to my ear, which is, like my Italian is very basic, but I can understand Italian, some words. But some of these words, they don't even sound like they are in Italian. Like Italian is very sort of like melodic, right? Like it's very musical. It's sort of like flowy. But when they speak with that Neapolitan accent, sometimes it sounds like the words are getting cut off at the end. So there's a lot of like they're trying to say something, but like it just ends in like a sound, and it's very weird. And like I said, he does some kind of gangster, and not in a bad way, just it's kind of cool. But yeah, it's a very distinct dialect. And I heard we were watching the Sanremo festival, and I think there was one of the contestants, and I forget his name, but he was pretty interesting because apparently he sang in the Neapolitan dialect. And that was very distinctive and very unique. So you can even tell like the music that comes from this area is also very distinctive. And I like it. I like the music from here. Like we've gone to some events when they had a band, and I do like the music from here.
Yeah, and I find, yeah, like you said, a lot of the songs, even a lot of the kind of like dance or pop songs have that, Neapolitan dialect in it. So it's been romanticized in a lot of the Italian movies too, especially with Sophia Loren. I think she popularized it quite a bit back in the day, and that's why you see it quite often. And I think it's my favorite of all the Italian dialects. I'm kind of partial to it.
Do you? I can't remember. I haven't really seen any like Sophia Loren movies in Italian, but does she speak in dialect in that one, in those movies?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, she does speak in a Neapolitan dialect in most of the movies. And then there's so many other popular, so many other popular actors or actresses from back in the day. There's also that popular actor Mario Merola, which has a very distinct Neapolitan dialect, even though I don't think he was from the area. But yeah, it's been pretty prolific back in the day in a lot of movies and music.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Like it's, again, for somebody learning Italian, it sounds very foreign. But I think for me, and I know you disagree, but for me, some of the sounds that come from that, they do remind me of the Barese accent, which is even more difficult to understand.
There could be some similarities, but the Buddy's accent, it's it's all its own. It's very difficult to understand, even for me.
Yeah, so there you go. Here's lessons in Italian. If you're coming to Naples and you want to learn the Neapolitan accent, it's probably going to be fun. But did you know that song "O Sole Mio" is actually from Naples, and it was made famous by, I think it was Pavarotti?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. So in addition to music and the dialect, there's a lot of street art. We've touched upon it a little bit, but Naples is also known for like street art scene. And you see a lot of murals now that I think of it. There is a lot of it. Like wherever you go somewhere, like little streets, big streets, there's a lot of street art in Naples.
Yeah, so let's talk about my favorite thing. So, food in Naples. There's so many things to eat, to try. It's not just pizza, but obviously there is pizza, and the margherita pizza is actually the most popular, of course, all over the world. It's very well known, and it was actually born in Naples. You can still visit the original, pizza parlor that actually invented it, and the name of the pizzeria is actually Pizzeria Brandi, where it was made.
Yeah, and I think you can still go if you want. I think they have a plaque outside that says, home of the pizza margherita. And I would say I agree with you. I think this area like has the best pizza. We've gone to all over Italy, but I think like Naples an area, I think this is the best pizza that I've had. But let's talk about the other things that Naples is famous for.
Well, actually, before we even move on to that, quick quiz for you. Why did they call it the margherita pizza?
Well, because it was created for the Queen Margherita in her honor. So I think the original pizza was what we know as marinara, which was just dough with tomato sauce. So to make it fancy, they added the Italian flag colors, which was adding the cheese to the tomato sauce and basil. So that's why you have the colors, and it's named after the Queen.
Correct.
Now, let's move on to the other pizza thing you eat with spinach. What do you call that?
That's pizza con l'erba, they call it. And it's basically pizza that's, I guess, a really thick pizza that's been cut in half. And they put, like, basically sauteed greens in there. And it's usually, rapini or some other type of green. And it's kind of tossed with olive oil, garlic, capers, olives. It's, you know, there's various ways they can make it, but I love it. And then especially in Naples, it's basically the same pizza dough they use for their pizzas, just without the tomato sauce, and you got the greens inside, and I love it. I grew up on that, and it's a super popular, I guess, dish here, and and it's not everyone goes for it. They always go for the pizza, but the ones that know, they always go for that. So it's one of my favorites.
I have a pasta dish that I like, and I never remember the name of it. It's, the one with, it's basically like a mixed pasta. So you have different types of pasta and they are mixed. It's almost like a stew. So you have some seafood, you have this mixed pasta, and you have beans. And it's a bit saucy, but it's more like a stew. It's not like a liquidy soup. It's more like a stew. And I don't, there's some tomato, but when you look at it, it's not red like a tomato soup. It's just kind of more like, I don't know, like a bean color looking. Do you know what I'm talking about? What's the name of that dish?
Yeah, it's basically pasta fagioli with seafood in it, right? I think what they do is they cook it almost like a broth with the seafood and have the beans in there, and it gets really thick, and then they put the pasta in there to cook with it, and it gets even thicker. So it's almost like a stew after.
Yeah, that's I like that. That's one of my favorite dishes whenever we go there. Another one of my favorites is there's a lot of pastries here, but the one I like is called the baba, and it's like a moist cake, and it's just kind of not filled, but it's saturated in like rum liqueur. So sometimes you get like different cream in it, or you can like it's cut in half with like some cream in it. I like the plain one because it's really nice. It's nice and sweet, and it goes well with like a cappuccino.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that particular sweet, but my favorite is actually, or I have a couple favorites, but the other one is actually a really well-known one, which is called the pastiere, which it's the Neapolitan pastiere. It's basically cooked grains with ricotta cheese, and then there's like candied orange in it, and it's kind of in a pie type thing. So it's actually really good. It's my favorite, and it's super popular around Easter.
And that's a Neapolitan thing, right?
Yeah, that is a Neapolitan pastry, and it's kind of, they make their own variations in the Campania region, but the real pastiera is with the grains. Sometimes you'll see it made with rice, and it's not my favorite, but I think that's actually very common.
Yeah, see, like I don't like that one. So we have our favorites. And another one that I guess that Naples is known for is this sfogliatelle, right?
Oh yeah, I love those.
So I'm not a big fan, but I think there's two kinds, right? There's like a puff pastry and there's like a crusted pie. Like one has ricotta cheese or
Yeah, and that one is called the frolla.
oh,
So
okay.
it's basically, uh, it looks like a little round, yeah, almost like a pie. It's almost got the pie crust, but it's a little more flaky, and then it's got the the cottage cheese in it with usually some sort of candied fruit.
Yeah, and I think there is a place that's like famous. Well, there's many of them in Naples, but there is one near the train station. I forget the name of it. The one that there's always a lineup whenever you go, and there's always people waiting.
Yeah, the one where you have to get a number to be served. That one is the one that's called Atanasios, I think.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's the one.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, but if you're ever in there and you want to go try it, that's the place to be. So another, I guess, food item that Naples is sort of famous for is its coffee.
Oh yeah, the coffee. That is actually very unique to Naples. It's almost, it's hard to say. It's almost like an espresso, but a long espresso. I think it's brewed similar to how regular coffee is made, but much stronger. They have a unique roasting process, and yeah, and it's got it's got a funky carafe they use for the coffee when they brew it. It's very unique. So you'd have to actually kind of search for it when you're in Naples. Not all the cafes would have that coffee. So you might actually find one of the smaller shops or smaller cafes with a little stand outside that would have that specific type of coffee.
Yeah, and I think many people always say that the reason for the coffee is it's the volcano water or the water from, Vesuvius. But actually, that's not true. And the uniqueness comes from the way the beans are roasted, not the water. So there you have it. So again, when it comes down to food, I would say there is a huge number of great restaurants we've been to. And again, because Naples is such a diverse city, like we've mentioned in previous episodes, whenever we have a craving for something that's, not Italian, we can go to Naples. So we've been to a number of Thai restaurants. We've tried some other food. And I think, for us, Naples is great because it has a lot of the traditional Italian foods, lots of traditional local foods, but also has a mix of, non-Italian dishes, which we are excited about.
Yeah, so when visiting Naples, it actually can be a perfect base for you to visit other areas in the region. Obviously, you have Amalfi Coast, which can be easily accessed, either via bus or by boat. There's Pompeii, and there's, of course, Herculaneum, our favorite. And you can visit all the islands, right? You have Capri, Ischia, Procida, and so many other places that you can visit. So it's a perfect base for for a tourist. And of course, you have Caserta, which is not too far off. It's a short driving distance from Naples, where you can visit the palace there.
Yeah, and the palace, which if you are in Naples and you go to see the royal palace, so Caserta was basically done by the same architect, which was I think it's Luigi Vanvitali. And it's very similar. Like he did both, and you can tell the similarities between the two. And it's beautiful. I think it's, of course, like many others, it's modeled after Versailles. And we've talked about Caserta before, but it's basically an amazing place to explore if you want to know and learn more about the history of Naples and the people who ruled it, because it's fascinating. So you have Caserta, you have Palazzo Real. So there's a lot of historical royal palaces, lots of museums, lots of buildings that you can explore. I think for me, I love going to Naples because every time I'm there, I find some new building that I like that I've walked by before many times, but I didn't see. And now I can see them. So it's fascinating. But for me, another thing that I love about Naples is that it's not just what's on top, but it's what's underneath. Because Naples is one of those cities that has so much to offer. And like I said, like you have over 2,000 years worth of history. So there is going to be stuff that's under the ground that is really worth visiting. So if you're getting around by the subway, you probably want to take line 1. There is a huge thing in the underground where there's certain subway stations on line 1 and some on line 6 that have been they've been designed by like famous architects, and they have like installations. So there's, I think, about 15 of them, and they have about 200 works of art. So now we've seen the Toledo. I mean, I have. Have you ever taken the subway there?
Yeah, we saw that one time. It was back in several years ago, 2018 maybe. Yeah, where we saw that cool roof in the subway when you're going down the escalator. It's all tiled up and
Is
looks
it the
like you're
blue
under
one?
the yeah, it looks like under the water, right? So that was really cool.
Yeah, that's the Toledo station. So I think that's the most famous one, but there's others. And I was just thinking about it. I'm like, we walk around like a lot when we're in Naples, but maybe we should like take the subway and check out some of these stations because honestly, like we usually walk around and again, that's one thing about Naples walking around is the hills. So there is a lot of stairs, a lot of stairs that you have to walk. So maybe we should look into taking the subway next time we're there.
Yeah, I think that'd be a cool experience because I think a lot of stations are nicely done, like the one we saw there at the Toledo station.
Yeah, so it's that's our mission for next time. Take the subway in Naples and check out the the stations. Another thing we haven't really seen we've seen it but we haven't used is the funicular that you can take in Naples. It takes you on top to the castle that we were at with the monastery and the views again are spectacular. So we ended up driving and parking around that area, but you have the option as well.
Yeah, we'll need to figure out the scheduling for that since we always see it, but it's always closed.
I think we just show up at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So again, going back to the underground, we've done some touring. So one of the tours that we did was the Napoli Sotterranea, which basically I loved it because it takes you underground and you go through these cisterns that were built by the Greeks back in the day. And then, the Romans came and of course improved them. So you have these old cisterns that used to like hold the water. And then you have this Roman theater. There's a Roman theater that was just covered and built on top of. And there was a family that lived there and they had this secret passage down to like the basement. They just thought it was like a cool basement where they can just go down and like store things. And I can't get over that. Like, how do you think this is like just a cool basement when there is just like Roman theater rooms? It's like unbelievable. That was probably one of my favorite tours because the guy was telling us that part where we were, the part of the theater that's like visible is where, so if you know like ancient history, well, you know that Emperor Nero fancied himself to be like an actor. So I think this was the stage where he would get ready. So like the dressing room area where where he would get ready to perform. So again, that was like, to me, it was just such a cool experience to go and see this, portion of this theater that like people lived on top and they were like, oh, let's just throw a bike in there.
Yeah, I'll have to agree that I think that was probably one of my favorite tours of anything that I've experienced. Seeing the underground catacombs was awesome. And I think we also saw where back in World War II they used it like a lot that the rebels used it basically as a hideout, back in the day. So it's really really cool, and there was a lot of remnants of that from World War II down there.
Yeah, that was also the Galleria Borbonica. I did that one where they had, they were like, it was in addition to the other one, they were sheltering and it was kind of creepy to see it because I think at one point I was told there were up to like 6,000 people in this underground and they had these toilets, which like looking back at it from like today's perspective, you think, my God, how like creepy and barbaric this was. But I guess back in the day when you have, the city's getting bombed and like people have to seek shelter, maybe to them it wasn't so bad, but it's such a sad reminder of like, how much the city suffered and the people who were actually just trying to survive. So it's sort of creepy when you go in those little tunnels and you have like, what was happening. But another one of my favorites was not during the war, but do you remember we went to this church, like a monastery type church, and underneath that church there was like a whole Roman market?
Yeah, I remember that the street market that was under the church. They discovered that old ancient street market, and it was fairly intact when we went through it. So it was actually very cool to see. And I think they were still excavating a bit more of it, but it was huge. And this was all under the church.
Yeah, and I think the only way they discovered it because when the bombs were falling on Naples, one of the bombs hit the courtyard and they were like, oh, look, there's stuff underneath.
Yeah, that is super cool.
That is such an Italian thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look, there's stuff underneath that goes back for centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, for me, I want to say that's one of my favorite things, but I would be lying because I love so many things about Naples. So yeah, if you come to Naples, I do recommend doing like an underground tour, whether it's the catacombs or if it's the Napoli Sotterranea or the Galleria Borbonica. There's just a different world under the city, and I think a lot of people don't really get to go see it. And it really is fascinating because like I said, Naples has such a long history, but it's also such a fascinating city, right? It's a vibrant city. There's just so much to do. There is piazzas filled with life. There is, bars, restaurants. There is like people. There's just so much life in the city. Like I love the vibe there. I love the sounds, like the smells, like you'll smell pizza as you walk by. Like it's a fascinating city to get lost in.
Yeah, I'll agree. It's a beautiful city. I think it's very underrated. And all these people that say that there's still crime and this and that. I think that's been overblown. So I would highly recommend visiting. It's got to be one of those stops down when you visit the area.
I agree. And I think I've heard like many people say that Naples is a place to come if you really want to experience like the true Italian culture. So it's not like, I guess if you look at places like Rome or Florence or Venice, there's just so many tourists there. And I think a lot of it is sort of sanitized, right? Like you have that. But whereas Naples, it's a bit more of like nitty gritty, sort of like this is life, that's how we live type of place. So, there's still touristy things to see, but it's like there is like this vibe in Naples that you don't necessarily see in a lot of different places. And to me, that's really cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Naples does have its own vibe, and I think that the changes that have occurred over the last decade or two have been for the better. So, they do cater to tourists quite a bit now, but it's not as touristy as all the other cities like Rome or Florence, like you said, and I think it's probably one of my favorite cities in all of Italy, outside of obviously Rome. I enjoy every time I've visited.
Yeah, and I think we're due for another trip to Naples. Maybe we can go next weekend.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would
Let's
be a good time to visit when the weather gets a little bit better for us to walk around.
Yes, and maybe this time we can take the subway.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so there you have it. If you're thinking of coming to Italy and, if you're thinking of going to the Naples area, I would say do it. There's direct flights to Naples from different international destinations. So, I would recommend, come to Naples, stay here for a few days, immerse yourself in the city. There's a lot of things to see and do. And if you're wondering about the region, you should listen to our episode that we did just previously. I'll link that in the notes as well. And enjoy Campania, not because we just live here, but, it has a lot of different options for people to see. And I think it's a great place to explore.
And I've said it several times already, and it's a very underrated region. There's so much unexplored areas, then you don't have the same number of tourists, so it's a great time to visit any time of the year.
So there you have it. Come to Naples and come to Campania region. And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.